Chief Justice Lourdes Sereno speaks up about her supposed missing statements of assets, liabilities, and net worth. In a 130-page comment and annexes, Sereno says she was not the only one who failed to submit all asset declarations to the Judicial and Bar Council. She says even justices who testified against her failed to do so. Our Angeli Mario has more.
Solicitor General Jose Calida is questioning the appointment of Chief Justice Maria Lourdes Sereno for her alleged failure to file complete statements of assets, liabilities, and net worth from 1986 to 2006 when she taught at the University of the Philippines. But Sereno says the submission of all salins to the Judicial and Bar Council was not an absolute requirement, and the JBC allowed substantial compliance, meaning there was an attempt to comply. Sereno says even her fellow applicants failed to submit one or some of their salins, including Acting Chief Justice Antonio Carpio, Associate Justice Teresita Leonardo de Castro, retired Justices Arturo Brion and Roberto Abad. All of them made it to the short list. Both de Castro and Brion testified against her at the impeachment hearing. In fact, Sereno reveals of the 20 candidates considered for the Chief Justice post in 2012, 14 failed to submit all their salins while in government service. A June 2012 JBC announcement states applicants with incomplete documents will not be considered for nomination. The minutes of JBC meeting shows Acting Ex-Officio Chair Diosdado Peralta says, in case of non-submission of documents, the JBC could ask the nominees during the interview for their non-compliance. Senator Chis Escudero, who was then part of the JBC, says the candidates should inform them of their reason for failing to comply. But then Escudero raises the case of retired Justice Abad, who lacked some salins but submitted the rest of them. He calls this substantial compliance. Sereno also points out it's within the discretion of JBC to determine whether an applicant had complied with the JBC's requirements. Based on the records of JBC, Sereno says it has shortlisted 300 candidates for judicial posts despite their incomplete documentary requirements. Sereno explains not once while she was teaching at UP did its Human Resources Development Office ever bring to her attention her failure to file any salin. She says she submitted salins for 2009, 2010, and 2011 to the JBC as one of the nominees for the top magistrate post. She also wrote to the JBC explaining why she could not submit her previous salins, considering that most of her government records are more than 15 years old. But she has since then renewed efforts to locate the rest of her salins she filed as UP professor. She has recovered most of the missing salins and will continue to look for the others. As to the details, Sereno says she will present all her recovered salins before the Senate impeachment court. In her one-on-one interview with CNN Philippines, Sereno says she's ready to answer this issue.
Alam nyo, maraming maling nasabi. Gusto naman namin mag-participate. Ayaw nila kaming ipa-participate. O sige, di, kayo na lang muna. You have your day, we will have our day.
Sereno again appeals to her colleagues that ruling on her quo warranto case and preempting the impeachment process would be tantamount to overthrowing the Constitution.
The term political dynasty could be a thing of the past if the Constitution, the 1987 Constitution, gets a complete overhaul. Consultative Committee head and former Chief Justice Reina Uno says banning political dynasties will be a monumental achievement. Uno heads a team of constitutional experts tasked to review the Constitution. Under the proposed Constitution, leadership succession from the same political family is prohibited. It also disallows a sitting official's second-degree relative from running in the same election.
We are not focusing on any particular person or entity. We are doing this for the greater interest of the people. We will do what we think is best for the country. We will cross that bridge when we reach it.
House Speaker Pantaleon Alvarez bears PDP Laban's possible senatorial candidates for 2019. This during the oath-taking ceremony of PDP Laban members in Caloocan City this morning. Alvarez asked about 5,000 members of the audience to support PDP Laban's senatorial candidates. Among those in the lineup are Special Assistant to the President Bongo and Presidential Spokesman Harry Roque. Senate President Coco Pimentel, the president of the ruling party, is also included in the slate. Alvarez says the lineup is not yet final. He also denies what he did was premature campaigning.
Hindi. Walang premature campaigning. Hindi pa nagpa-file ng certificate of candidacy. Di ba? Once na mag-file ka ng certificate of candidacy mo, yun, meron papasok na yung premature campaigning. Kasi governed ka na ngayon nung election laws.
PDP Laban is President Duterte's political party. The country makes its debut in the Chinese securities market today with its issuance of so-called Panda Bonds. The government offered more than $1 billion worth of renminbi denominated bonds or Panda Bonds to investors in China. The Treasury Bureau earlier said bond proceeds will fund the Build infrastructure program. A major Chinese credit agency earlier assigned the Panda Bonds the highest AAA rating with a stable outlook. The country's Investor Relations Office says the bond issuance affirms improving ties with China and increasing relevance of the Chinese currency renminbi. President Duterte wants to fast-track the lease of military properties to help fund the needs of troops, particularly the education of their children. The President was guest of honor during a ceremony marking the Philippine Army's anniversary today. Our senior correspondent David Santos joins us live from the Army headquarters in Taguig. David, what else did the President say to the Army?
Well, projecting himself as a caring father to his children, President Duterte once again reiterated to members of the armed forces he is just one call away whenever they are getting through tough times. Well, the President, speaking to Philippine Army troops this afternoon, offers to talk about their problems over coffee. He also assured them his administration is doing everything to provide soldiers with benefits and arm them with proper equipment so they can perform more effectively. Now, the President also wants to expedite the lease of military land here in Fort Bonifacio as well as those in Nueva Ecija and Capiz. He says this can help solve the AFP's perennial problem of funding, especially for social services of soldiers and their families, particularly on housing and education. Finance Secretary Carlos Dominguez, the President adds, is studying proposals on how to carry out possible joint ventures to develop idle military properties. Now here's the President in his own words.
I would insist that it should be finished this year and it will be dealt solely by the armed forces of the Philippines. Ang habol lang ni Dominguez is there should be a facility. Hindi niya, ayaw niyang ibigay diretso, gusto niya dumaan ng parang bangko ninyo. And that would be like a GSIS only for the armed forces of the Philippines and the Philippine National Police.
Now, the Philippine Army which is commemorating its 121st anniversary this week, is still reeling from the 5-month campaign to liberate Marawi last year. Of the 168 government forces killed in the operation, almost 3/4 are from the Army. Now, the Army's most ranking officers are holding a 2-day conference here to discuss and update security strategies. This year's conference theme, focusing where else on fighting terrorism and radical extremism, should give the Army leadership opportunities to assess and step up policies on addressing threats following the Marawi siege and persistent atrocities of lawless groups in Mindanao. Pia.
On Justice Secretary Vitaliano Aguirre grabbing headlines in the past days because of his department's recent decisions and his statements that did not sit well with the public and President Duterte himself. Our senior correspondent Ina Andalong reports how the Justice Secretary responds to a number of issues.
The president had just threatened to send him to prison after his prosecutors cleared Kerwin Espinosa and Peter Lim of drug charges. President Duterte, clearly displeased with this development on the admitted drug lords, told Justice Secretary Vitaliano Aguirre to fix it. And Aguirre did.
I issued an order yesterday vacating the dismissal of the case, so much so that there's no such dismissal anymore. And I ordered that the case be ordered wide open for both parties, the complainants and the respondents, to file whatever evidence they have. The motion for reconsideration filed by CIDG is rendered moot. So yan po ang status ngayon. Wala na po ng dismissal.
But just when he found a way to appease the president, Aguirre finds himself hounded by more issues that could again taint his image. It's not exactly the best position to be in now, with the president said to be thinking about reshuffling his cabinet.
Nakakausap po na ating Pangulo. And I could not feel that whiff of no trust and confidence from him. And besides, there's no reason why I should resign because wala naman akong kasalanan. But even if wala akong kasalanan, if the president says so, o yun nga, nakaramdam ako na kulang na yung pagtitiwala sa akin, mabilis pa sa alas 4, resign tayo.
Aguirre is on the spotlight again after his agency agreed to provisionally place alleged pork barrel scam mastermind Janet Lim Napoles under the Witness Protection Program. Napoles lawyer Stephen David said Aguirre and Executive Secretary Salvador Medjaldea in a meeting in Malacanang even gave him legal advice to seek for Napoles' jail transfer before the Sandigan Bayan, days after she was provisionally placed in the WPP. Medjaldea has denied giving such advice. Aguirre clarifies there was a meeting but no, there was no legal advice, not an intervention. Aguirre says he refused David's plea for the DOJ to order the transfer of Napoles from the Taguig City Jail to a DOJ safe house. David supposedly tried to appeal this with the Executive Secretary but to no avail.
Gusto niya i-overrule ako ng a seeming representative of the Office of the President. Kasi ayaw kong pumayag na kukunin ko lang si Janet Napoles dun sa kulungan at ilalagay ko sa WPP. Hindi ka pwede yan. Mag-file ka ng motion sa Sandigan Bayan. Oh. Ganun din ang opinion ni ES. Yun ang ginawa niya. But it's not giving legal advice.
What is it, sir?
He is just giving his opinion.
Napoles' provisional entry into the WPP has stirred speculation that the administration may have forged a compromise deal with the alleged pork barrel scam mastermind, perhaps to use her against the opposition. The DOJ is studying Napoles' affidavit where she promised to tell all. It doesn't end there for Aguirre. Cebu City Mayor Tommy Osmeña is threatening to file graft charges against him. Osmeña says Aguirre meddled in tax evasion cases filed by the local government against big businesses in Cebu City. In his Facebook account, Osmeña explained how Aguirre replaced Cebu prosecutors with Manila-based ones to take over the case. He says Aguirre received money in exchange for the case's dismissal.
In Cebu, napakahigpit ng labanan ng Office of the Mayor and ng SM. Kaya, and they are, yung isang grupo dyan is saying that some of the prosecutors are under the influence of some local officials.
President Duterte is tight-lipped about the looming cabinet reshuffle. Despite these controversies, his Justice Secretary believes he's safe.
Law experts say the publication of the Rome Statute in the official Gazette is not a requirement for it to be recognized in the country. The Rome Statute, of course, created the International Criminal Court. This is contrary to President Rodrigo Duterte's position that the treaty which created the ICC is not part of the law of the land, as it was not published. Our CNR Angel has more.
Law experts disagree with President Duterte's view that the Rome Statute, which created the International Criminal Court, should have been published in the official Gazette to be binding. Human Rights Commissioner Roberto Cadiz says the rule on publication, which applies to local laws, isn't a requirement for international treaties to be enforceable. He says the Rome Statute became part of the country's laws when it was ratified by the Senate in 2011. And while the treaty wasn't published in the official Gazette, its website contains a press release announcing that the Philippines has deposited the instrument of ratification for the Rome Statute.
If you're talking of publication, there was substantial compliance in terms of notifying the world that the Rome Statute, that we have entered into the Rome Statute as a state party.
University of the Philippines law professor Tony Lavina says that if publication was a requirement for international treaties to be binding in the Philippines, several agreements would be rendered useless.
If you follow that logic, all the treaties that we have entered into would not have such an effect then. The moment we ratify an agreement and we deposit that ratification agreement, that treaty becomes part of the law of the land.
But Chief Presidential Legal Counsel Salvador Panelo says that unlike other treaties, the Rome Statute needs to be published because it is a penal law. He adds, other agreements are binding in the Philippines even in the absence of publication because they follow the Constitution.
This is strictly a penal statute. That is why our Constitution, with respect to penal cases imposing penalty of imprisonment, should be strictly observed. Yun ang kaibahan. If the treaty itself and the country that entered into are compliant with the Constitution and the rule of law, then there's no fraud.
Panelo says the benefits to staying in the ICC are few, so it's better for the country to be out of its jurisdiction.
Did we need ICC to oust Mr. Marcos? Did we need ICC to jail Mr. Estrada? Did we need ICC to have the EDSA revolution? It's the sovereign people that will speak and protect itself. We don't need ICC.
But Lavinia says the ICC is essential in ensuring the present and future administrations are accountable for their actions.
We badly need international law, including to deal with domestic situations when we cannot deal with them properly.
Despite appeals from the ICC and other groups, Panelo says the president has no plans of returning to the ICC. And even if the court's chief prosecutor continues its preliminary examination on the Philippines, he says the government will not be affected by any findings it will have.